friends, it's me Blanche and welcome to Feast in the Middle East as Easter is approaching. A lot of you like that kakil asfar recipe that I posted recently, basically the bread made in the Holy Land during Easter time, and I'll link up a card for you if you haven't checked it out yet. But today I wanted to explore an Easter cake with several stories behind it. It is a light almond and cherry cake with a hint of orange with a marzipan topping. And those marzipan balls on this cake are just loaded with symbolism. I'm gonna teach you how to make it just in time for Easter, so you don't wanna miss this episode. Okay, there are some weird and wonderful theories in relation to this cake called the SIMNEL cake, which is super popular in the UK. One legend has it the cake is named for an old couple that were named Simon and Nell. And so Simon and Nell wanted to repurpose ingredients that were left over from Christmas. So they repurposed it to make a spring cake. And that's why it's called a SIMNEL cake, named for that couple.
Another story is this cake was made to break the fast from Lent at Easter time, and the balls are supposed to represent the 11 apostles. And one of the balls is missing because that was Judas.
So in this context, the word simnel comes from the Latin word simila, which means fine flour, which was a fine flour used to make this cake. Whatever the story is, this cake is absolutely delicious if you are a marzipan fan like me. It's a totally different flavor experience than to have the usual frosting on a cake. The marzipan takes the place of the frosting. And usually there's 2 layers of marzipan in this cake, but for simplicity, I just put one on top. I actually modernized this cake by making it both low carb and gluten-free, and let me tell you, everyone loved this cake. They went nuts over it, no pun intended. Even the kids loved it. So let's get baking so you can learn how to make it too.
All right, this cake is super simple. Let's start by cracking 4 fresh eggs into a large bowl and beat them until they are super fluffy and frothy. Next, add the zest and the juice of 1 orange. You could use a cheese grater if you don't have one of these handy zesters. And although I didn't capture the juice on camera, I did squeeze this orange and put the juice into the batter as well. Then add 1 teaspoon of vanilla paste or vanilla extract. I personally like the paste because it has those little vanilla beans in there. For a Middle Eastern touch, I added 1 teaspoon of orange blossom water. If you want to add more, feel free to do that, but don't dump too much or else it'll taste like you dumped an entire bottle of Chanel No. 5 into your batter. Next, I melted 4 tablespoons of butter and just threw it right in there because butter makes everything better. Now blend the wet ingredients really well, at least for a minute. Bonus is you'll probably get 100 extra steps in your step count for the day. So here's the deal. I have a love affair with Trader Joe's allulose powder instead of sugar because it's sweet without that funny aftertaste, and it still leaves the cake golden brown without all those extra calories, which means you can eat more of the cake. I just had to use half a cup. Don't forget the baking soda and powder. I used half a teaspoon of baking soda and then 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Now here's how you make the cake both lower carb and gluten-free. 1.5 cups of almond flour. Now you want to use fine almond flour, not the almond meal, because the almond meal is too grainy. Mix it all up to combine well. The original cake uses those candied cherries, which are full of artificial colors and flavors. Forget that. I just used dried cherries, about 1/3 cup, and bonuses, they taste much better. Now cut a piece of parchment paper along the cake pan as a guide, because this will be at the very bottom of the batter to make sure that the cake doesn't stick. I like to grease both the parchment paper and the sides with butter. Now pour the batter into the cake pan and you're going to bake it for 30 minutes at 350 degrees. Try not to take gobs of this cake batter as a sample in between. Let's see if you can do that. Make sure to tap the pan on the counter a couple of times and you are good to go. Now it's time to shape the marzipan, which comes as a block. I ordered this right off of Amazon. It's almost like working with Play-Doh. So I cut the marzipan into thin slices and then I kept rolling it until it was about 1/4 inch thin. Then I used my cake pan as a guide to cut it into a perfect circle. With the leftover pieces, I rolled them into 11 balls. Remember to leave Judas out because he was naughty. By the time I was done with the marzipan work, the cake was done. So all you have to do is take off that parchment paper and put the cake on a cookie sheet because we're not done with this yet. What I did was add a 1/4 cup of low sugar apricot jam to the top. This will not only flavor the cake, but it will help the marzipan adhere to the cake during baking. Now you could put the marzipan on top of the cake. If you want to add extra flourish, you could sort of flute the edges the way you would the pie crust before baking. This is not necessary, it's just an added flair if you wish, and then decorate with the remaining marzipan balls. Now for the final touch, set your oven to broil and put the cake in there for about 3 minutes or until you start to see the marzipan browning. I would keep an eye on this process or else the marzipan will burn and all of your work would end up in the trash. You want it to look just like this. I love historical recipes that tell a story. Now this cake is lightly sweet, so you could even eat it for breakfast the next day with a cup of tea. I think I'm gonna add this to the list of annual Easter baking projects because everyone just loved it. I had as much fun making this cake as my family had eating this cake. And that's what I love about these traditional recipes is you can adopt them and make them your own, as food is pretty much a universal language meant to be shared to make it all the more special. I hope you enjoyed this quirky recipe and I'll be back with more very soon.